The Truth Girls.
Hi everyone, Truth Girl Sonia here. I have a very interesting story for you today. It's about the Paracas, an ancient people who some people think may be alien hybrids. Many years ago, in Paracas, Peru, there were found these skulls, which were unusual. First of all, they were very elongated, and they had red hair, whereas of course everyone else in South America has black hair. Also, the skulls were abnormally large, and there was a difference in the cranial sutures. Eventually they figured out that these unusual skulls belonged to what was a type of ancient nobility who apparently lived underground. So here is a picture of a normal skull on the right and a Paracas ancient nobility skull on the left. So you can see that the skulls are very different from a regular skull. Here's a picture that shows a skull with some of the hair left on. This hair looks a little brown, but usually it was reddish or reddish blonde. In case you're wondering what they look like from the side, they look like this. Pretty strange. Now, most experts around the world agreed that probably the elongated shape of the skull was due to head binding. However, this does not explain why the skull itself has 25% more cranial volume and is 60% heavier than a regular human skull. You really notice the difference when you compare the skull of a normal baby toddler to the skull of a Paraca baby toddler of around the same age. It's much bigger. It looks totally different. Head binding definitely can't explain everything. Okay, look at this is a Paraca elongated skull, and here is a regular bound skull, like someone who's had their head bound. It's a lot smaller. Here's a child, a regular child with a bound skull, and here is the Paraca baby's skull. So it looks totally different. It's much bigger. Okay, so there's this guy called Brian Forrester who is an author and researcher. Well, he lives down there where they have these Paracas skull, and he works at the Paracas Museum. I actually interviewed him a few years ago on the radio when I was doing my show, and he was a really nice guy, very knowledgeable, and he also gives tours. So if you are flush with cash and you feel like seeing the Paracas for yourself up front, you can take a tour with Brian. So Brian had been doing research for a long time, and he has a website, he has a YouTube channel. I'll tell you all about the Paracas. Finally, what he did was he got some of the DNA of these skulls analyzed. He managed to get DNA analyzed from 4 skulls. Now, the original reports, it wasn't easy to do this because this DNA was very old. The baby skull had been identified as being having died about 1,950 years ago, so nearly 2,000 years ago. And another one of the skulls from a place called La Oroya was dated to be about 850 years old. So it's very old. DNA is not in good shape. Finally found someone to analyze it. Now, originally said some of the DNA could not be identified as any kind of human DNA. So this website reported DNA test results, Paracas skulls are not human. Because originally Brian Forrester said the DNA that they got out of there, some of it couldn't be identified as any kind of human DNA. It says, interestingly, the mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from the mother, showed mutations that were unknown to any man, primate, or animal found on planet Earth. The mutations present in the samples of the Paracas skulls suggest that researchers were dealing with a completely new human-like being, very different from Homo sapiens, Neanderthal, or Denisovans. Brian Forrester himself said it had mitochondrial DNA with mutations unknown in any human, primate, or animal known so far. But a few fragments I was able to sequence from the sample indicate that if these mutations will hold, we are dealing with a new human-like creature, very distant from Homo sapiens, Neanderthal, and Denisovans. Those were the words of Brian Forrester himself. So that seemed really strange. Well, it's not human. What is it? Maybe it's alien. After all, maybe it's hybrid with an alien. However, once they did more testing, they found that they did contain human DNA. They tested 4 skulls. The baby, which was 1,950 years old. The La Oroya skull, which was 850 years old. The Paracas Cleopatra, and one other one. They did find human DNA. but it didn't match the type that was in that area. It was a completely different profile. It showed that they came from Europe. They had a U haplogroup, a T haplogroup. The fourth one had a H2A haplogroup. Characteristic of ancestry from Eastern Europe, small parts of Western Europe, and the Caucasus region in modern-day Crimea. So what the DNA results showed was that they were from Britain, Northern Europe, and also Middle East, like right in that area, but definitely not Asia. So it proved that they couldn't have, come over the land bridge of the Bering Strait and made their way down there. I mean, their genetic profile was totally different. They're human, or at least partly human. I don't know if they had maybe some other DNA in there that, like he said, he couldn't identify. But they seem to also have human DNA. But they seem to have come from Europe at a time when supposedly Europeans had never been to the Americas. Something about that definitely doesn't match with the official story of how the Americas were populated, who was in there, and how they got there. Now here's one last thing. This is from ancientcode.com. Test results performed on the so-called Cleopatra of Paracas, who died some 2,000 years ago, revealed equally fascinating results showing that the sample belonged to the H1 group, traces of which are found in countries of Western Europe and the Basque people, Iberia, and parts of Northern Africa. Interesting that they mention the Basque people. The Basques are in a part of Spain, and they're very different in that, first of all, they have very high rates of O negative and negative blood, and they're built kind of different. There's some theories about that they might have different sort of ancestry, like mixed with something else, not just regular Homo sapien. Here's something really interesting. It's an old article, The Mystery of Malta's Long-Headed Skulls. That there were these skulls also found in Malta, which is in Spain. And what they said here was, long ago in the megalithic temple of Halsaflium, sorry, it's all blurry because I enlarged it, in Malta were buried men with extraordinary cranial volume. Their skulls seem to observers today to belong to a truly alien stock. If properly understood, could these skulls provide a link between the ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian cultures and a race of sacerdotal, meaning priestly, men identified with the serpent? Okay, I don't know what all that's about, the priest and the serpent. Actually, that's kind of interesting because maybe that... Oh, I'm just seeing more connections here. Okay, these are the skulls from Malta. Large cranial volume, elongated shape. The Paracas have a similar skull. Malta, Spain is where the Basques are. The Basque DNA is also connected in some way with the Paracas. So maybe these skulls that were found in Malta are connected with the ones in Peru. And maybe they come from an ancient noble / priestly line. What does this have to do with the serpent? I'm sorry, I don't know. We are back from a visit in Malta where we traced an ancient tale originating from megalithic temples to the mother goddess, adorned in prehistoric times when the island was an important cult center. We are trying to resolve a mystery of truly stunning implications. Well, we gotta wonder how the Paracas ended up in Peru and why they would have left Europe to go there. Maybe they were part of some strange cult and they split because they were persecuted, and then they set up shop as now the nobility in the area they were in Peru. And maybe they do have partly alien blood. We don't know, but it looks that way. It's possible. Maybe this has something to do with what the Bible refers to as the Nephilim. So anyhow, let me know what you think, and thanks for giving me a thumbs up. And thank you for sharing my video. And thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.